One of the most popular figures in folklore around the world is that of the vampire. These mythical beings are the corpses of the dead, come back to life in order to feast on the life force of the living. Each culture throughout the ages has had their own version of the vampire myth, with creatures that vary in size and shape, and even species in some cases. So, without further ado, here comes my top 5 list of vampire myths from around the world. And not one of them sparkles. Number 5. The Akkar. The Akkar, or Akkaru, are ancient demons from Babylonian times, and one of the oldest embodiments of the vampire myth. They were thought to be the rulers of the dark cities of the Mesopotamian underworld, a place where malignant spirits live in a mirrored way to the living world. The Akkar were described as gaunt, pale, and ugly blood drinkers, who were the children of Nergal and Ereshkigal, the gods of death and the underworld. Number 4. Jiangshi. One of the strange vampire myths has to be that of the hopping corpse, or Jiangshi, from China. As the name suggests, these bodies come to life, move about by hopping with their arms outstretched, which is probably due to rigor mortis or muscle decomposition, and they seek out the living to feed on their life force, or qi. The creation of these creatures can be any number of things, such as a spirit possessing a dead body, or a portion of the soul not leaving the body due to improper burial, suicide, or the soul simply not wanting to leave. The ways to counter or stop these creatures are just as many, and range from objects like brooms and axes to the blood of a black dog or a rooster's call. Number 3. Greek vampires. It was common in 19th century Greece to believe in vampires. In fact, 3 years after all burials, the bodies were exhumed to check how decayed the body was. If the body looked sufficiently decomposed, the remains were drenched with wine, and a priest read scriptures to make sure the spirit was restful. If it hadn't sufficiently decomposed, guess what? You had a vampire in the family. This was caused by a great many things. Perhaps you were excommunicated from the church, or you died alone. Even eating the meat of a sheep killed by a wolf, or being an unbaptized person, could give the same fate, especially if you were a bit superstitious. Some Greek vampires were quite friendly creatures, and they often returned to the land of the living in order to help support their widows, though most were ravenous predators, whose unfortunate victims would be condemned to a vampire-y afterlife too. Number 2. The Aswang. This creature is from the Philippines. They are described as a mixture of vampire and witch, and are predominantly women. During the day, these creatures have the appearance of normal women, but once the sun goes down, they can transform into a number of forms depending on which island you live on. Though the major description is a woman with wings and a huge tongue that can split into two at the waist in order to fly through the villages looking for prey. Other descriptions have heads which fly off dragging their entrails behind them, dogs with forelegs longer than back legs, cats and birds. The favourite prey of these monsters are young or unborn children, who they suck out of the womb using their long tongues. Maybe we will just stick with Twilight. And number 1. The Slavic Vampire. For anybody familiar with vampires, these guys are the closest we get to a modern description of a vampire, as this is where Bram Stoker got much of his inspiration for Dracula from. These creatures were the dead bodies of people who were born with teeth or tails, or were excommunicated. Same as most vampire legends, they rose from the grave at night in order to feed on the blood of anybody foolish enough to be near them. Often they were thought to be the cause of diseases such as the Black Death. Most of the ways to stop these creatures we still take as granted today, such as staking, burning, garlic, and crucifixes. One particularly clever way they used was to place a scythe above the neck of the vampire, so when they rose up in the coffin, they would decapitate themselves and save the locals a lot of work. An easy way to decide whether a person was a vampire would be to exhume the grave and see if the body looked bloated with blood around the mouth, which was a sure sign of feeding, and longer hair and nails than when the person was alive. We now know that these things are all natural byproducts of decomposition, but back then I guess it kind of would seem like the corpse had just got up and gone. So guys, thank you very much for watching the video today. I know it's a little bit of a shorter one, but I hope you enjoyed it all the same. Next video coming up will be a top 5 creepy stories back to school special, and I will also be working on a follow-up to the cryptids video I did, and I'll be focusing on European cryptids. So, until next time, sleep tight.